short today. We have a guest presentation today that we're really looking forward to from Student Legal Services. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
In case you wondered, Student Legal Services. I'm Pam Durace, and I'm the director and the attorney at Student Legal Services. And
I'm Mike Lavery, one of the attorneys to one of the services. 2009.
Yeah, yes, but Mike actually was here as a student and worked in our office as a work study student. And he was here back
That's
in
right,
the 90s.
I graduated from state, go back.
And went off and did other things and went to law school, and then we hired him for an attorney. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit. So for those, there we are, for those that didn't know this, we have a law office on campus for y'all. The good news is, the big thing, the red, it's included in your student fee. So it does not cost y'all anything to come see us. So we will help you with all of your student organization things and all your questions. But I'm going to talk a little bit, just because I've got a captive audience, and a little bit of other things we do too. But in case you didn't know, this is where we're located. 1107 Pullins, so that is right next to housing, right below career services, and right next to registration records. So at one point in your life here, you probably have visited one of those offices, so that's where we are on the other side of campus. The best way to get in touch with us, I know y'all may not like this, but it is through that email address. We do not have an administrative assistant, and we don't have a secretary. You got us, and that's it. So the easiest way to get us is just send us an email, and we are usually in touch with you in less than 24 hours. We check that thing religiously throughout the day. We are constantly responding. So please definitely email us, let us know what your student group is or whatever your issue is, and then one of us will grab it and take it and run. Because the other nice thing is it's directly to the attorneys. There's no in between. You don't have to schedule something through someone else or anything like that. And that's our website. It's at the bottom in small print for a reason. It's a terrible website, I'm sorry. We will be putting, because I said we will, and we've been talking about it, but we will be putting a Zoom up or YouTube, I don't know which, that's going to go into more detail. So this is what I told Harrison. This is not a step-by-step, this is how you do it day. We don't have time in 20 minutes. I'm not going to be able to do that. So we will be doing, like I said, a Zoom where we'll go a little bit slower. We'll talk about specifically, we'll have the photo up, or we'll have the EIN application up, we'll go through it, we'll show you how to do it, and all those kind of things. And as I told Harrison, that is good for those that are a new student group. The problem that we see with most of the student groups is you've been around a while, and all the leadership have done different things. We had a group this semester that got 3 EINs. You don't do that, but they did it. So what we have to do with each group is we have to talk to you to figure out where you are. You know, have you done part, because some of y'all have done part incorporation, part not. You haven't filed 99s. There's things that you have and haven't done. So we kind of need to look at each group individually. So I'm going to hit some highlights today. So don't get overwhelmed. I'm just going to hit the topics, but you really are. We need to kind of really Zoom with y'all or sit down with y'all and kind of talk about each group so we can figure out where each group is. So just so you know, too, prepaid, already in your fees, it is totally confidential. So let me just say this. We don't work for the university. We're not university employees. You could come tell us the worst thing in the world and it's okay. We don't tell your parents, we don't tell the advisors, we don't tell student government, we don't tell anybody. So realize that we are like regular attorneys because we are regular attorneys. So you have attorney-client privilege. We are licensed by the State Bar. There's 4 of us, and just so you know, one of them is an immigration attorney. So if anybody has any friends with the immigration issues, definitely come see us. Types of cases, landlord-tenant, criminal expungement, all this. It's a general practice law firm, all right? We actually go to court with you, and it doesn't cost you. So this will be the first and only time in your life that you will have pretty much free attorneys. So anyway, definitely think about seeing us about other things. Now, this is what you're here about. All right, student groups. So one of the biggest things with the student groups is liability and risk. And that's really why you incorporate that, or if you do decide to do that, you do nonprofit status. So the 4 kind of things we have here is to look, you need to plan what you're doing. Spontaneous things are not your friend for your student group. spontaneous, when you do things spontaneously, injuries happen. Things happen that you never expect. That's why it's called negligence or accidents. It's not planned. So you want to plan. We'll talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about the nonprofit status, the myth that everybody has to be a 501c3. So that makes everybody's already relieved. So that means I don't have to do it. Releases and insurance. Okay, so this is just, okay, this is a common sense slide. It's not necessarily a legal slide, all right? So one of the things that y'all really need to do, for, especially for any of y'all that have physical activities and that kind of thing, you want to kind of put rules in writing, all right? Because should you ever get sued, which you don't ever plan on either, or anything like that happen, one of the things they want to look at is, did you explain to people? Did they know the risk they were involved in? Did you have any kind of rules? Did you have any way of trying to lessen risks before injuries and things like that happen? So it's a good thing, especially with, like I said, any physical things, that you kind of put rules in writing. Bylaws, and I will say this, great student involvement has their template of bylaws. This is not, when you're a group, it's not a, hey, let's just have a template, check the boxes, and now, oh, we have our bylaws. The purpose of the bylaws, and I'll have a slide on that in a second, the purpose of the bylaws is so everybody knows what officer does what, how do you become a member of the group, what is the group doing. It's kind of, you know, it's like a plan in itself, if you want to call it that. So it's expectations. So you want to make sure that we go beyond the template, and we will help you do that if we need to. Who's going to write checks? Who signs contracts? Who has the ability to bind y'all to any legal thing? So those are the kind of things you're going to want to put in bylaws. Supervision, you kind of want your officers to have some, hopefully, skill in whatever you're doing and knowledge, and have leadership ability, which is why all y'all are here. Congratulations, leadership ability, very good. You want to make sure you have the proper equipment and tools. You want to inspect that in case y'all have any of that kind of stuff. You may not for one of y'all's stuff, but proper space, you inspect the space, and if you're using intramurals, that's obviously the university, but you still want to check too, because there could be issues. Proper training for the officers, and I know that's what student involvement is about. The biggest thing we run into, and I'm going to tell you this quite truthfully, I don't know, I just became president, and I don't even have copies of the paperwork. They just told me to get in touch with you. I don't know what we've done, I don't know what we do. That to me is not proper training, okay? We will try to get you up to speed as best we can on what our part is, but y'all really need to consider, and again, I know student involvement does that, and it's getting better with that, but really need, especially for treasurers. I mean, I have treasurers who do not know what reconciliation is, does not know what a check is, how to. I had a treasurer come see me, did not know what a checkbook ledger was. She handed me a checkbook ledger with no dates, and all it had was, you know, different things, and it spanned 4 years. So I'm going, what is this? So, you know, we do need some training. Also, medical emergencies, just in case any of y'all are doing anything physical, and insurance, which you may need even if you're not doing anything physical. You may need it depending on where you're going to have to live. I'm sorry. All right, so you can, in North Carolina, have an unincorporated nonprofit. That basically means you don't do the 501c3, you don't do the stuff through Secretary of State, you don't do anything except do nonprofit things. And that is a possibility. I feel very strongly that that is probably not the route you want to go. Again, it'll depend, and I have a slide, might be the next slide. I have a slide on here that, on some things you take into consideration when you're making that decision. But you are able to have real property. Supposedly you have protection from liability. I'm an attorney. I would not want to go into court with an unincorporated nonprofit. You talk about protection not being there. I had one of the club sports teams that got sued for multiple 7 figures. 7 figures. And what saved their butt was we had incorporated them as a nonprofit and they had insurance. I cannot tell you, that was the biggest mess. But anyway, so you can be an unincorporated nonprofit, and as long as you do nonprofit things, you're okay, but you still have some filing requirements with the IRS and things like that still. So that would be, you would have to do a 990, which I'll explain in a minute, but So that is a possibility. I get that question a lot. If you're a really small group, you take in $100 a year, that may be where you want to go. You know, you're not out, you know, doing anything physical or anything like that. You're all sitting around talking about, I don't know, something, Harry Potter, which you don't. That's so fascinating. But anyway, something like that. You probably wouldn't need to, but most of y'all, that's not the case. A lot of y'all are doing, you're raising money for charities, or you're doing educational things. So that's the reason a lot of you will want it to be a nonprofit. Also, if you're an unincorporated nonprofit, you tend to be very casual with your records. Records are your friend. I know you don't like that, but yes, they are, because when the IRS comes auditing, because they don't know you're an unincorporated nonprofit, but even if you are, they may want to check to see if you really are. You're going to want to have records. You're going to want to have your bylaws. You're going to want to have some things to prove what you're saying. Not that y'all sat around every Saturday night and ate pizza. That's not a nonprofit. Don't get to call yourself a nonprofit for that. You still have to do the 990 filing, whether you're an unincorporated nonprofit or not. You still are subject to audit by the IRS. Fundraising, you can forget fundraising. There is not anybody in the world that's probably going to give you money if you're an unincorporated nonprofit. Y'all probably, as leaders of your group, have already run into this, where they want at least 501c3, or at least if we can show them from the Secretary of State, which again I'll go into in a minute. It is very much going to hamper you with trying to get money. Now, if it's just a casual thing you're doing, you may be able to do it, but I can tell you that's why we had a flurry of activity at the beginning of the semester. Everybody needing, I need 501c3 for, what was it?
The voluntary concessions.
The concessions, yeah. Oh my gosh.
If they didn't have it at that point, they weren't going to get it.
Yes, that was too short notice. But anyway, so anyway, those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. When should a group think about incorporating? Depends on your history. If you are a group that is in and out of existence, you may not necessarily want to. In other words, 5 years go by and you don't even meet, or something like that, and then another group of students come in and want to revitalize. You may not want to incorporate, but that's not what most of the student groups that we see are about. What's the purpose? If you are doing anything physical, absolutely you incorporate. I am not kidding. You just really want to avoid any liability whatsoever. If you're traveling to seminars, to conferences, and things like that, car accidents are big ticket items. They're going to sue everybody that has a deep pocket. They're looking for everybody, and that means they will sue individuals, as well as officers, as well as, they'll try to bring NCSU into it, but they won't get very far because student groups are not a part of the university. You cannot hide under the coattails of the university on this. So depending on what your group does, if there's going to be any injuries, you don't have a choice if you take in more than 5,000. You're going to have to do some federal paperwork and become a nonprofit. One of the reasons for that is the federal government says usually if you take in less than 5,000, you're pretty small. We're going to let the state regulate you. We're not going to worry about you. You're not affecting the public that much. That magic figure of 5,000, they figure, okay, now the public is aware of you. You're going to be raising money for more people. We want to protect the public from you, basically, is the way to look at it. So over 5,000, you have to come see us. I don't care whether you like it or not, you're going to have to come see us so we can do the nonprofit. What's the leadership of your group? Are they strong? Or is it just, the other thing too, is if you just have one person and they're pretty much the group, then the group may not survive when they're done. So you're going to have to cultivate your leadership to make sure you want the group to keep going. Is your advisor involved? Advisor. One advisor increase. It helps very much to have an advisor involved. And we will talk to advisors, so if you have questions. However, we want to talk to the leadership too. We don't want the advisor being the whole group. Y'all are in a position of leadership on a purpose, so you need to make sure that you're also involved. Source of money. If you want donors, if you're going to have corporate sponsorship, if you're going to apply for grants, if you just, for instance, Chipotle, they want to see 501c3. If you're going to do one of the nights where a percentage goes to the pizza go, or whatever, their food goes to your group, they're going to want to see paperwork. They're not going to want any of this unincorporated nonprofit stuff. And are you part of a national? Very rare do you get to take on the nonprofit status of your national. It is something that we have to check with every group when they come to see us, if that's the case. Because to do that, the national has to have provided specific IRS paperwork to the IRS naming specifically your group as being a part of them, and that does not happen often. So you may be a chapter. That doesn't mean you can't be a chapter of them, but it usually means you have to get your own nonprofit status. But we would have to check. That's another reason we'd like everybody to come in and see us so we can check. Okay, and this is not a how-to, okay? Notice how that's not a how-to, but just a basic outline. What we always do if you're going to be a nonprofit, we start at the state level, we get approval from the Secretary of State that you have a nonprofit purpose. That's all the Secretary of State does. It's not a difficult form, fill in the blanks, check boxes, it's not hard, it's a lot of addresses and things like that. They don't even ask you what you do, which I find interesting. When our office became a nonprofit, when I did the nonprofit status in the 90s, we had to do this long page, we had to attach all this stuff. Apparently they got tired of reading everybody's stuff, and so they don't ask it anymore. But anyway, and it also reserves your name. So they're the ones that tell you you have a nonprofit purpose. Then you want to be tax exempt. Believe it or not, there are nonprofits that can be taxable. That's one of the big things we would prefer you not to be taxed on. So we have to go to the North Carolina Department of Revenue to get a tax exempt letter, and our office does that for you. You're done. You're a nonprofit. Shock, right? That's not that difficult. Now, we need to go to the federal level if you take in more than $5,000. Okay? You don't have to do this every year. That was a question that one of the questions that the Engage thing had was you don't have to do this every year. And so if we have to do the federal level, we do the 1023-EZ, and again, that's a one and done usually. That's typical lawyer work, usually. There may be times when it's not. So this is just so you can see it, we're not going to go through it. This is what the form looks like for the Secretary of State. It's not difficult, like I said, names and addresses and checks and boxes. We help you with this, okay? We go through the forms with you. We will even mail them in. We will help you stage by stage, so don't feel like I'm just throwing this stuff up here and saying, go at it, okay? We really will help you with it. And this is what the North Carolina Department of Revenue wants to see. They have particular things they want to see in your bylaws. Y'all call it Constitution. It's really the one. So we will make sure that you have those paragraphs in there. But then they're not as trusting as the Secretary of State. They want to know what you do. They want to know how you raise money, and they want to know what you use it for. It's not a difficult thing. There's not really a form for this, but we will go ahead and get information from you, and our office submits it for you. They take about a month, maybe, if we're lucky, to get back with you over whether or not you get nonprofit status. The Secretary of State, the first stage, gets back within about 2 weeks or less, so they're quick. Anyway, so there's that. Federal level, there's all kinds of tax exemptions. There's at least 29 and counting that you can have. Most of y'all are going to qualify if you're going to do the federal as a 501c3. That's educational and charitable. Because it's very rare now that I see a student group that's not raising money for somebody. You know, they do at least one community service a semester, or they raise money and give it away to a charity. Technically, you're supposed to do it within 27 months of starting. That rarely happens, but it's supposed to. We can try to work around that. Mandatory if you take in 5,000. There's a long form and there's a short form. Fortunately, when y'all start out, as long as you take in less than 50,000 your first year, not a problem for most of y'all. We can do the easy form. It's cheaper, it's short, it's only 2.5 pages, it's not hard to do. Y'all's are going to be public funds, not private funds. When you think of private funds and private foundations, you think of the Bill Gates Foundation, you think of the Ford Foundation. That's where one entity has the chunk of money, it's using family money, and then they divvy it out to nonprofits. Y'all are taking it in from student government, you're taking it in from dues, you're taking it in from sponsors, from fundraisers and all that, so it's considered public funds. So that would be y'all. Unrelated business income means you don't become a nonprofit because you want to have a business on the side. We have so many students come in with all these business ideas and then say when they're done, oh, and I want to be a nonprofit. That's not the purpose of your group. So unrelated business income cannot be all that you're about. Now, that doesn't mean you can't sell T-shirts and Krispy Kreme donuts, by the way. But that is for fundraising that's used for a specific purpose. But, and then it's theoretically one-time filing, and unfortunately, it's $275. I'm sorry.
Is that cheaper?
Well, it's cheaper than the other. The EIN, I'll mention that only because I know that's the first question y'all usually have, because that's what your first contact is of what you need to do. The EIN, we call it the social security number of the business, okay? So when each of us is born, we each get a social security number, and when you work, your individual taxes and everything go into that. Well, the businesses are the same way. The government wants to keep track of them and the money they make, so they have to have an EIN, which is an employer identification number, easier, just whatever EIN. This is where we run into problems. That's the reason we need to talk to y'all. If y'all already have an off-campus bank account, there's an EIN attached to it. So we can try to help you find out what that is. We got a slew of questions. I don't know what our EIN is, you know, and so we had to figure out how to get it. Last resort, we call the IRS, and that's hit and miss whether they'll get it to us, but we can usually track it down. But that's, if you have a bank account, if you have money, you need an EIN. If you don't have money, you don't need an EIN, because the IRS keeps track of money. So rarely do we see a group that does not have money. So I don't think that's the case. The form you fill out is the SS4 form. We really would like to talk to you before you fill that out. I find that y'all just check boxes and guess. Not a good idea, because that then is in the IRS databanks, and whatever you guessed at could have an effect on what they're expecting from you. So we can change some of that information if you've already done it, but it can be difficult. But anyway, you use it for your W-9s, and that you have to have on file with the university if you're getting any money from student government or any money from the university. Use it for your bank accounts. Vendors, if y'all are starting to ask for or asking for sponsors or donors, a lot of them are going to be asking for that EIN, and they have the right to ask for that. You can't say that's private. You can say that, and then they'll not deal with you, but they have the right to be able to ask for that. And IRS, okay, if you get you should get a letter from the IRS now.